As France's medical cannabis pilot program reaches a critical juncture, this session will look at the vital insights into the country's evolving regulatory landscape. We're going to look at the latest data from the pilot program, examining patient access challenges, prescriber engagement, and supply chain hurdles, domestic cultivation prospects, and also opportunities for international operators in what could become one of Europe's largest medical cannabis markets. Please do welcome your panel to the stage. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here and listen to what we have to say about France. We have a wonderful composition of panel today with Ludovic, Marie, and Hugues, who will introduce themselves briefly. Myself, I am Benjamin Jeanroy, the founder of Augur Associates, who is a consultancy based in France. And we've worked with everyone around this table for some years in the development of the new framework that is coming into place in the country. So we're going to go a little bit through how we got here, the specificities of the French framework, which is like no others. We like to do our thing a very specific way, I would say, although you will find similarities, obviously, from other European framework due to European regulations. One of the things that we will see into this discussion is how the specificity of the framework will allow, we hope, and we are actually seeing currently in the development of companies in France, just like Hugues' overseas company will show us, that you need a little bit of imagination and agility. And innovation will be something that is intrinsically linked to how companies evolve into that very tightly regulated and specific framework. And we do foresee experiments happening in France because of that particular framework, being exported afterwards into other parts of the world because this innovation will not just be for France. So that said, I will let everyone around this table present themselves, and then we'll go back to a couple of questions, and hopefully we'll have a time for a little bit of exchange at the end. Marie, if you want to start.
Hello, my name is Marie Sanchez. I'm a French attorney and I run a law firm dedicated to the life sciences industry and I have a cannabis practice. I've notably helped Ludovic and his industry organization working and negotiating the legal framework for the legalization of the medical cannabis in France.
Ludovic.
Hi everyone, so my name is Ludovic Rachou. I'm the president of a French trade association for CBD and medical cannabis. And I have also a company called Delos, which specializes in medical cannabis in France. And I'm happy to speak about the specifics of a French framework, which, as Benjamin said, is pretty complicated and complex.
And Hugues.
Good morning, everybody. Hugues Peribert, I'm the CEO and founder of Overseed. We are a company that obtained the first authorization in France to work on the R&D on medicinal cannabis. We are growing and developing medicines for the French market first.
I'll rebound on just what you said a little bit. So you're creating and you've been building for some years one of the most developed French I'd say vertically integrated project in the country. What do you think made your endeavor specific compared to other company building in other countries? How the specificities of the French framework has shaped your company?
When I studied this subject, I was convinced that it was a very complicated value chain, complete value chain, and we had to develop that in France because it was potentially an important market. We had all the expertise on the territory to be able to develop a vertically value chain, but by aggregation of the best expertise that we had on the territory. And then you come to a subject which is the sovereignty. The sovereignty is developed more or less in relation to its environment. When you are in a very complex regulatory framework, when you have on the territory all the expertise, and for example, for extraction of active ingredients, France is a world leader because of the history of the cosmetic industry. When you have the relation with the patients, the relations with the actor, the more you got all this, and the narcotic compliance, the more you got these subjects, the more the sovereignty takes an importance. It doesn't mean that it's a closed market, absolutely not, but then you can develop a strength on the territory for an interesting market. When you've said that, you come to the pharma criteria, pharma grade, and the long-term vision that it seems that the French authorities wanted to put on the market. We have, I think, the most highest expectations that have been defined by the French authorities. Then we have to be able to access to the market, to submit files that will come to Module 5, to Module 1, to Module 5. It means that they consider it as a medicine. Medicinal cannabis in France will be a medicine or will not exist. So it means that all this has to be done. It's a lot of work. It's very specific. The expectations on characterization, on pharmacovigilance, on pharmacocinetic and some preclinical studies that they will ask absolutely for these files will be are very complicated and very costly. So it makes a real pharmaceutical market. And then, is it an opportunity or is it a problem? In fact, everything should be focused on the patient. And it's a patient-oriented because of the specification of this market. And I will let Marie and Ludovic speak about all this. But this is an opportunity for innovation, pharmaceutical innovation. So that's what we are working on. If you go on the French market, you need to have a pharma positioning. If you have a pharma positioning, you will face the finance and the cost of it, the target of IP, and the focus oriented. And then you will have a lot of opportunities for the new development, the Cannabis 2.0 in the market for formulation, finished product, and many other things.
Thank you. Many things that we can try to tackle here, but two dimensions, and there will be one for Marie and one for Ludovic. I think it's important perhaps to give a little bit of context and explain what are the regulations, how we came to the rules. So maybe just starting with Marie and the specificities of the pharmaceutical framework and how the French administration didn't create de facto a specific cannabis framework, but really integrated cannabis into the pharmaceutical existing pharmacopoeia, and how, what are the advantages, what are the issues with that? Maybe Marie, you can help us see a little bit more clearly.
Well, I think Hugues said it. We come from very far in France with a lot of stigma. So basically, if we want to have medical cannabis in France, it's either pharmaceutical or it's not at all. So that was the first challenge. The second point is that when they set up the experiment, the pilot program, they determined a certain number of factors. And again, some people still believe that the pilot program's purpose was really to determine whether medical cannabis was effective or not. That was not the point. The point was really to determine what would be the best or the most accurate way to deliver medical cannabis to patients. And so in the phase we are now, which is in the course of legalization and setting up the text that will finalize the legalization, the government and the competent authorities kept the same criteria as the ones we had in the pilot program. First of all, because it's the way to make things go faster, if I may say, even though things were very, very delayed last year because of our political situation. But that was the fastest route. So the criteria today are that we have 5 therapeutic indications that are covered. Epilepsy, oncology, palliative care, central nervous system disease, and multiple sclerosis. And then the pharmaceutical forms that will be used are the same as those used during the pilot program, with the exception of dry flower. This was removed, but there is still a possibility to use vaporization. The only thing is that the dried flowers will not be used as a whole product. They will be used in sealed capsules so that they cannot be any misuse. But there is still a possibility. It's just, again, a matter of creativity and a request from the industry to come up with secured pharmaceutical forms. I think
that needs to be therapeutically argumented and showing the interest of that product form. But theoretically, every product form is possible to register.
Yes, absolutely. And again, the legal framework will be what it is when it comes into force, but there is room for improvement and there is room for evolution, which means that in the future, there will be opportunities for new pharmaceutical forms. There will be opportunities to open to new therapeutic indications. But again, this needs to be justified with the competent health authorities. But there will be opportunities.
Thank you, Marie. I wanted to go back to one of the topics that you mentioned, and I think it's primordial because we have a tendency as an industry to throw around the word patient a lot, and talking about patient for patients and doing it for the patients, and sometimes it lacks substance. And I want to commend Ludovic's work in those past years with his industry group, Vivek, and they have not only led the charge in reforming and advancing that regulation, but they've also done it, I think, in a win-win collaboration with many patient groups and leaders, which we are somehow a little bit lacking for many different reasons in France. But I wanted, Ludovic, if you could come back a little bit on how that went and how the implication of patients were critical in advancing, especially this last year. I think it was determinant. So how did that go?
Yeah, I think, as Marie said, I mean, we could have wrote a Netflix movie on cannabis in France. It was supposed to last until 2023. We're in 2025, and it's still going on. So once you said that, and I think you're especially right, I mean, patients have been the critical group there, especially in the recent years, where every year we had to renew the experiment in the pilot program for a new year. And the only reason this happened is because of the patients, and because we tend to forget there are about 2,000 patients that are currently benefiting from medical cannabis, and it has improved their life dramatically. So it's when you hear the stories, when you hear what they've been through and how medical cannabis has helped them, then you know why you're doing this. And I think this is actually what the politics are looking at, and the reason they actually went through this whole pilot program, and now that we're seeing this framework come into force. So if we look at where we are now, I think it's safe to say that regulation is going to happen, whether it's before the end of the year, 2026. We're gonna see medical cannabis in France in the near future, but we're still missing 2 essential steps. One being the evaluation, which is ongoing by the French Haute Autorité de la Santé, basically the high health authority. So it's an independent authority in charge of evaluating medicines. And as Hugues said, it's a medicine, so there's no reason it shouldn't be evaluated by this authority. The good news is, and they recently announced this, they will open consultation for any patients that was in the experiment. So that means the patients will have a voice, and it's usually not the case necessarily. Usually it only goes for associations. Here, individual patients will be allowed to give their feedback on the pilot program. So this is great news. But that means that we also need to come together as an industry to help the evaluation. And this is why we're opening a consortium approach with different companies that are both in the experiment but also outside to submit data to the high health authority within the next few weeks. And this is open to anyone, whether companies that are already operating in France or want to come in. And I think it's critical because if we miss that step, the whole goal of this evaluation is to ensure that we have reimbursement. If we don't have reimbursement, we don't have patient access. So in the end, we're doing this for nothing. And I think this is really the next most critical step, is ensuring that we have reimbursement. What you need to realize is that when you go to a pharmacy in France as a patient, you just show your card, your script, and you'll get your products for free. It needs to be the same for medical cannabis. Otherwise, doctors are not going to prescribe it and patients will lose access. So that's the first step and the most important one in the next few weeks. And the next one is the one on pricing. Because if we want industry players, as Hugues mentioned, it's going to be really costly to enter the market. So we need to make sure that there's actually a business model there. And this is where social security comes in, and the discussions that we're currently having is how the products will be priced. So we're expecting a final decision on this by the end of the year, but this is going to be highly critical as to where, if we can get any products on the market, and also innovations. You can imagine anything on the French market: soft gels, capsules, vapes, inhalers, suppositories, patches, whatever you can think of. There's no limitations. But there needs to be a business model, otherwise it doesn't work. So I'd say before the end of the year, we should have a final view on what medical cannabis is going to look like. But I mean, the fight is still there, and we still have a lot of work to do.
Just to rebound on that last bit, because the question of making it a business model, I think, is primordial. We're here as an industry, and the health pharmaceutical industry is fairly developed in France, if not hugely, with big players that have shaped European regulation and French regulation in regard to health for some time. So we do feel some caution from the administration from the very beginning in dealing with cannabis industry, not only because it comes from the cannabis industry, but also because of the pharma experience that and the huge investment and means that those groups have. And sometimes the cannabis industry is kind of mixed with that pharmaceutical lookout, when the industry, as we mostly know, don't have that kind of power at all, or that kind of reach. So it creates some complexities. And I wanted to dive in a little bit into the creation of a French industry where you will have production and transformation on site. When we are looking at the worldwide playground, there is immense competition with many different players. How have you built your company, Hugues, as something French specific, but that can obviously expand afterwards into other European countries? But how, very basically, are you able to compete with players that have years of experience and are going to come into France with the complexities that it entails? And we can come back to it and what it means for foreign players to want to come in and export products to France. But so your products will be probably hitting the shelf in January Q1 2026. What have been the major issues that you've confronted yourself with, and how have you made yourself different from the existing competition?
I think that with the specifications we have in France, if we can make it, we'll be able to do it anywhere there. This is the first thing, speaking about the product. When we speak about competitivity, all my experience, professional experience, was in the value chain of specialized products, high-value products. The cost of the production is not the subject for me, the production of the flowers. I mean, when you see what you need to put around the flowers to challenge the expertise that you have on the production of the medicine, I mean, the cost is not on the flower. It is a product, a starting material, a GMP product, but the cost of it is not the cost of the finished product. So the question of the competitiveness, I think it's much more important to be near the actors, near the expertise. And in fact, this is the some advantage that we had in France. 68 million people, you're near the patients. It's a complete value chain with expertise. We are near the actors. The question is to work with these synergies and develop it.
Thank you. Maybe a question for Marie here. We've talked a little bit about the regulatory. What does it mean for a company to want to come into the market? What kind of rules they have to observe? What is the process to register products, or if they want to export a product into the country? How does that look like in legal and regulatory speaking?
Well, what we call the use authorization for a traditional medicine, if I may say, we talk about marketing authorization for medical cannabis medicines. We talk about use authorizations delivered for 5 years initially and renewable. The dossier for the authorization is of the same level in complexity as for any traditional medicine. The only exception is that those medicines do not have to go through the 4 rounds of clinical trial. But the specificity of the dossier, the complexity, and the quality requirements are the same. So we're really in a pharmaceutical environment. The other criteria is that if you want to distribute and operate a medicine, cannabis-based medicine in France, you need to be registered as a pharmaceutical company. So that's also an authorization you need to obtain from the French Health Authority. If you want to import narcotics, and if you import cannabis-based medicines containing THC, you're going to have to need a license to import narcotics into France. So that's a lot of authorizations. Again, we're talking about competitivity, but that's for sure is going to make a natural selection among players. But I do also believe that those requirements, as stringent as they are also a guarantee of quality and stability in quality. And we heard it before in a panel regarding the UK, where a patient actually pointed out the issues related to quality and the fact that from a batch to another, the quality of products could vary a lot. And that's something that the French system might be able to tackle. And I think if we're talking about patient interest, that's what we've been trying to do. And I strongly believe, even though I know some people may not like to hear it, but the French system may just inspire other systems in Europe. Spain is following the system. They are even more strict than the French system regarding the therapeutic indication. Portugal may also be one of the followers. So in the long run, I think this is complex. This may seem as something that will prevent players from entering the French market, but I also see it as a very sustainable system in the long run.
And something that could shape EU regulation in the future.
Yes. And the pharmaceutical regulation in Europe, some parts are left to the discretion of member states, but the regulation on medicine authorizations and so on is European. And I think the purpose in the end, even at the European level, is to have something harmonized. So that could definitely influence the European regulation.
Ludovic, I know you want to follow up.
Yeah, and I think it's actually what the French government announced when they came up with a regulation is they want it to be European regulation in the longer run. And they have this view that if it's an actual medication, it should be available for anyone in broader Europe. So I think you're completely right. It could become a model, especially if you're thinking about patients, social security, and reimbursement. Once again, it's not a paid medrec market, it's an actual medical market.
Very quickly, before we get into a couple of questions, if you have some, we'll take a couple. But as a patient who is not enrolled currently into the trial, what are the next steps? We know the accessibility is restricted. It's in last resort. It's 5 conditions with stringent requirements to get into the requirements of the indications. You have to go see a specialist into a specialized center or hospital for first prescription, then it's moved to GPs for the follow-up. But what are the steps if I am a patient in France and I'm looking to try cannabis to see if it's going to help?
So basically, I think that the first step as a patient would be to ask your GP, who would then point you out to a specialist in a hospital, mostly the case, and then he would potentially enroll you and prescribe cannabis as you would do any other medicine if he already tried other treatments. Also important to note that as part of the evaluation by the higher authority, they will evaluate medical cannabis and how it's prescribed, also in which position in the therapeutic strategy, regardless of what the authorities put in the regulation, because we're an independent authority. So we might have any good surprises. I'm not counting on it, but one never knows. And I think in the end, it's up to the doctor to say, yes, you should try this. Have we tried all our treatments or not? Or this is more beneficial, less risky, so you should try this. So this is the process. But I think because we've had this pilot program for about 5 years now, we have around maybe 800 doctors that have been trained to prescribe medical cannabis. And I know for a fact from a lot of them that they have a waiting list of patients that they want to include. So the day this comes up, there will be more patients coming in. And it takes a lot of education. So having doctors that are now completely convinced about medical cannabis, and some of them were reluctant to prescribe at first, but having this experience will help, and sharing that experience will help. And I think it's about what we do in terms of public events and education to educate more doctors. And to that extent, I'm also happy to say that we're working with the Cannabis Europa and Business of Cannabis team on an event in Paris next year. So hopefully we'll get doctors to participate and also educate the general public on how cannabis can help patients.
Thank you very much to the 3 of you. We have time to take a couple of questions, if there is any. Yes, Robert, there, if you can shot.
On the Swiss panel, Luke said that Switzerland had a long and seemingly positive history with cannabis. It sounds like France has the opposite, a very negative history. Why does France dislike cannabis so much?
I
Depends
would
who
say
you
the
ask.
opposite.
Depends who you ask, I think.
We're the biggest cannabis consumers in Europe, so I'm not sure we have such a bad history with it. But
It goes back to Napoleon bringing it to, you know, after the Egypt campaign, and it started to get banned there. And so we have a deeply enriched, and with the industrial hemp even larger than this. So I do think it's a misconception that is very well placed into political decisioners, you know, elected officials, the administration. They have a perception that often the French society is more conservative than it is. And when we look, as Ludovic has said, in the highest consumption rate of the whole continent, including for primal consumption and teen consumption, which isn't something we should be proud of. And it's, I think, directly linked to our unwillingness to consider a form of regulation that is not prohibition. And so we do see the opening of medical cannabis as something quite, it was the best process as it could have been, I think, because it was well done by the administration, well integrated into the process, because one of the main targets was to make it acceptable to the parties, to the prescription, to the health department and professionals. Marie.
Yeah, and I'm going to say it out loud, but the purpose is to not have medical cannabis being a disguise of recreational cannabis.
Yeah, that's something that is completely different to other European countries in different stages of development, and France is definitely not going into that direction. So it's something that needs to be very clear. This is not a rec in the future disguised under medical pretenses. Another question, and we'll be good. Yes, Julian.
How are you?
How are you?
So my question will be, the first challenge that companies are going to face is registering a product, complying with the Module 3 and all of that. But then companies are going to face the challenge of distribution, which means patient access. How do you foresee the distribution is going to work in France through the traditional channels, and who's going to be a key player over there?
Ludovic and Zagu, or the contrary, Hugues?
I would say that it's a complete supply chain organization, and the challenge will not be there. To my opinion, the challenge is on the medical information, because it is there is a lot of constraints about that, and the work will be very complex, very deep. We still do not have all the information that allows us to prepare that completely, but this is something that is going on, and it will be very important, because what we've said is, and what we hear since this morning, is that to have a good patient access, you need a good quality, reliability, security, and safety about the product, and you need reimbursement, and then you need the prescriptors to manage that.
But I think as not a French company, you have three routes possible, either to find a distributor, basically. Either you do it yourself, so you build your own pharmaceutical company in France and you distribute yourself. Either you work with a company that does this as a service, so basically a third-party lab, or you partner up with an existing pharmaceutical company which already has other products. But these are the three options on the table.
And just to finish up, if anyone is interested in what's going on in France, we just published a report on the topic and have a couple of printed copies you can come and grab. So thank you again to everyone, to the panelists. Thank you, Cannabis Europa, for having us, and thank you everyone for listening in.